I've got to tell you about the church that we visited last Sunday morning there in Vegas, and actually two churches along the way that we didn't go to. So this was, all right, so we walked a lot in Vegas just because Uber is expensive. And if something was less than a mile or so away, we're just like, oh, we'll walk. It takes 20 minutes or so, you know. So we started walking towards the church that morning, and it just seemed like the longer we walked, I was looking at the directions on my phone. The estimated arrival time kept on going up instead of down. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't know what happened, but for some reason, I think it's because we were walking through a casino, and for some reason, the Google Maps doesn't understand that if you go in one door, you don't immediately get transported out the back door. Like there's this long, really big casino or something. So the number just kept going up. So we were going to be late to church at this point. So we exited the backside of this hotel casino. And I looked at the time, like, there's no way we're gonna get there. So I went ahead and called an Uber at this point. I'm like, let's try to at least make it there a few minutes late, okay? So called the Uber, gave him directions to the hotel. Actually, here's my mistake. And I looked up via the app the name of the church that I wanted to go to. Well, apparently that church had moved, okay? So he took us to the old location of where that church used to be, and we were like 10 minutes late or so to this other church. Okay, so on the way there, I realized, okay, this is what happened. I'm not going to tell him to turn around because now we're halfway to this other church. Let's just get to this other church. Okay, so here's also my thought process throughout all of this, okay? The original church that I picked out was a non-denominational evangelical church, okay? Couldn't find any Southern Baptist churches in the Las Vegas area, at least within a 1 mile radius. There were some outside of that. But anyway, okay, so we found this church that we were going to go to. It was a non-denominational evangelical church. Everything looked about it great, okay? Except one thing. It said on the website they believed in the gift of speaking in tongues. No big deal. Been in these kinds of churches before. I figured non-denominational, they probably don't make a huge emphasis about it. You know, it's evangelical, good Christian church. All right, so they might speak a little bit in tongues. All right. So on the way to this other church, however, I found out that they sold their old building to a Pentecostal church. So I was going into a church. We were going from a church that maybe spoke in tongues to one who definitely spoke in tongues, right? So this was an interesting thought process going on in my. So we're going to go to this church. That's fine. No big deal. They're Christians, right? We can worship God with anyone who's a Christian. Okay, so we pull up to this church, and I see across the street there's another church, and I think, okay, do I want to take a gamble and go to the church that I know that speaks in tongues, or this one that looks very, very normal? This is my thought process, okay? In Las Vegas. The name of the church on the building was, I think, Iglesia. So it was a Spanish-speaking church. So we go from a church that maybe spoke in tongues to definitely spoke in tongues that is biblically speaking in tongues. Right? Foreign languages, according to Acts chapter 2. So we go up to the door and I say, hey, is this service going to be in Spanish only or also English? He says, oh, English only. All right, so we're going into a Spanish and English bilingual church. Okay, so we go inside and, the formalities, they're already singing songs. The songs are in Spanish, but the words are English above it. So they are true to their word. It was also Spanish and English. And actually during the song, they also sang not just in Spanish, but also the chorus was in English. So it was a very interesting bilingual service they had. I was having a good time. So the preacher gets up and starts preaching completely in Spanish. However, they had an interpreter. They did have an interpreter. So here's what I wanted to share, bringing it back to spiritual gifts. The spiritual gift of that person of interpretation of a foreign language played a vital role in serving the church, and at least for Corey and I, because we wouldn't have had any idea what that preacher was saying, and I think still a few things were lost in translation. But we had a good time worshiping God with a church that obviously she was using her spiritual gift in service to the church and service to us. See, God calls all of us. God calls each one of us to serve in the church for the benefit of each other so that God would be glorified.